But I want to pause our conversation for just a moment to turn to the governor of the great state of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu. Governor Sununu, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
You bet.
So Chuck and I are just talking about Donald Trump's decision to pick Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate. I want to get your reaction to this. Do you see this as a pick that is purely aimed at building the MAGA brand for the future, or do you think there are potentially electoral implications in Vance?
Well, he's a good pick. There's no doubt about it. I think the clarity is in the contrast between J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris. I mean, that's what you're really looking at when you're comparing the two vice presidents. So you look at everything from his upbringing. He's a Marine. He's incredibly smart. I mean, they wrote a book and made a movie about his life before he was even in the U.S. Senate. And most importantly, yes, he's a senator, but he's only been there about a year and a half. He's still an outsider, right? And that's what I think a lot of folks, the Republican Party and a lot of folks in America want. They want an outsider to come in and kind of bring some disruption to this establishment in Washington, D.C. that just isn't listening to the individuals of this country. And so, you know, in that aspect, I think the former president has picked a great running mate in J.D. Vance. He has that contrast. He's incredibly smart. He's got those leadership skills. There's no question about that. And it's not about supporting the MAGA brand or this. It's not about brand. Guys, you said it yourselves. This convention is all about unity. Everyone's getting on board, not just on the presidential side, but up and down the ballot in state races and congressional races and Senate races. All the polls say right now the unification of the Republican Party is going to be very successful come November. And then, of course, as you just brought up, the contrast to the disarray in the Democrat Party right now couldn't be more stark. I mean, most Democrats want the president off the ticket, right? Leadership in the Democrat Party wants him off the ticket. That battle is going to go on right up until the point of the convention. And even if they nominate Joe Biden, it's not going to be with a whole lot of enthusiasm. We all know that.
Well, Governor, just to be clear, leadership hasn't said they want him off the ticket. And I think it's an open question still what the Democratic National Convention will look like. But there's no doubt there has been a debate inside the Democratic Party. But let me ask you about some of the divisions within the Republican Party. One of them is on the issue of Ukraine. And on that point, Senator J.D. Vance takes an isolationist view, very similar, very in line with former President Trump. I want to read something you wrote about the war in Ukraine. This was last year. You wrote, quote, "To abandon Ukraine would set off a negative chain of events for U.S. interests domestically and abroad. Vladimir Putin is knocking at NATO's doorstep, and without our support and the support of our European allies, Ukraine will fall, resulting in far graver problems for the United States, conflict across Europe." Are you concerned that there is going to be an isolationist ticket representing the Republican Party?
No, look, I stand by those words very strongly. I really do believe the battle for Western democracy is right on the front lines in Ukraine, and we have to be very supportive. A lot of Republicans in the Senate and the House supported that bill to make sure those funds move forward. Look, you're never going to find us all agree on every issue, and you know what? That's okay. That's what makes us, I think, a very strong party as Republicans. You know, you have your conservatives and your moderates. You have those that want big government and small government and all this, but that's all right. Fundamentally, we're always about the individual. We're always about creating more opportunity, not just these big government solutions. So at the end of the day, yeah, we might differ on some of the policies here, but everyone's coming together. They really are, because an election is about choices. It's Biden or Trump. That's it. And when you go into the voting booth, you don't have a debate, right? You got to pick one or the other, and the Trump Vance ticket is going to be far and away much more strong and much more to the ideals of someone like myself and conservatives that want to see this country move in a better direction.
But Governor, and I do have a lot of questions, so just quickly, I mean, you paint this as an existential threat, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, to global security, to Western democracies. I mean, do you have reservations about the fact that the Republican Party may retreat from what you have laid out as its responsibilities?
No, because look, they're not saying we're abandoning the issue of Ukraine and Russia. They're saying they're going to have their own strategies to go about it, and they're going to work with their allies. They talk a lot about NATO, and I think they're right. You have to hold NATO accountable, and they have to move forward. So again, we're cutting into some of the nuances of how to make sure that Western democracy is secured and America's place in the world is secured, because a strong America means world peace. So we can have slightly different ways of going about it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that we're going to abandon the ticket, right? We're going to abandon what's important, which is getting rid of this establishment, elite liberal establishment out of Washington, D.C., that frankly all of America has just had enough with.
Governor, you, of course, supported Nikki Haley during the primary. She is going to address the convention tonight. I guess the question is, she has said Donald Trump needs to earn the support of her supporters. Donald Trump has said, we don't really need him. Do you think he's done anything beyond inviting Nikki Haley to speak tonight to reach out and try to win over her supporters?
Oh, yeah. Look, again, it's not just about having one statement or making one overture. The unification of the Republican Party right now is unquestionable. And that goes from Nikki Haley supporters and Ron DeSantis supporters and Doug Burgum supporters and Donald Trump supporters. Everyone's getting behind the ticket. I think Nikki's going to be phenomenal on the stage tonight. I think she's going to show that unity. And at the end of the day, well, again, you have your primaries and you battle it out, and those can be very tough and they can get nasty sometimes, of course. But to have Nikki and and a lot of the other folks who ran against Donald Trump on that stage showing that support, it's very meaningful. There's no question about it. And it's just going to really solidify things over the next 3 days and show America it isn't just about MAGA base and all this sort of thing and one issue. It's about a party that wants to talk to the American people, more important, listen, as opposed to just standing on the shoulders of the families that built this country and keep telling them how to live their lives like the Biden administration is doing. People are really tired of that.
Governor, former President Trump has said that he's rewriting his speech in the wake of the assassination attempt against his life. He said it's going to be a more unifying message. He, of course, has a history of using heated, his critics would say very violent political language. Do you think he can be a sincere messenger in this space? What are you anticipating?
Well, if there's anything about Donald Trump, he means what he says, right? You can disagree with him all day long, but I mean, he talks off the cuff and extemporaneously more than anyone I've ever seen on a political stump speech. So the fact that he's willing to say, look, I have a different message. I see a different vision. I'm seeing things a little bit differently. And I think there's a different opportunity for his words, not just tonight, but over the next 4 months, to bring not just the Republican Party together. We've done that. He's done that. It's really about bringing this entire country to think more positive and hopeful. Again, it's all about that contrast, and the contrast to the Democrat Party right now, it's a nightmare over there. And you know what? It's their own fault. The Democrat Party, the elitists, the leadership, they all created this. They didn't want to talk about the border. They didn't want to talk about inflation. They didn't want to talk about crime and lawlessness and the homelessness crisis in their cities. And that's what Republicans want to do. We want to bring ideas and solutions and those things to the table, and that actually unifies people together. Right? Talking about the things that the American public wants us to talk about is a unifying opportunity, as opposed to just saying Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and all this sort of thing. People are tired of that.
Governor, let me just push back a little bit, because you're saying they don't want to talk about these issues. President Biden has actually spent quite a lot of time talking about issues from immigration to inflation, the border. In fact, there was a bipartisan deal coming together to deal with the issue of migration and the large numbers of people coming here illegally, and it was torpedoed by former President Trump, right? So can you actually say that they're not talking about this in Washington?
Once again, the Democrats are doing what they do best. Lots of talk, no action. What have they done? See, the border crisis got bad when Joe Biden signed 16 executive orders, completely changed the policies, and let everybody in. It turned out to be a disaster, as a lot of us on this side knew it would be. He tried to flip as fast as he could, but there was no law passed. No laws have been passed on the border for quite some time now. You want to put one bill after 3 years of realizing your policy's horrible, throw it on the House and say, well, if you don't vote for it, I guess this is your problem. No one's buying that. And if anybody was, then Joe Biden would be winning this election. What has he done to deal with inflation? He barely talks about it. He tells everyone that Bidenomics is working for them. Yet we have the highest credit card debt in this country. People can barely afford to pay their rent, and they can barely afford to put food on the table, but Bidenomics is working. So do not say that this administration has talked about issues. They've done nothing. And at the end of the day, with all the trouble and all the issues you might not like about Donald Trump, how he talks or how bombastic he can be, people want results. And that's a good thing. That means America is listening, and they're going to vote for change in November.
We should note the border crossings are down by 40% since President Biden signed a set of executive actions, and inflation is down as well. Governor
After being up 300%.
Thank you.
After being
Governor
up 300%. Come on.
Right, but it is down at a new low, so appreciate it. Governor Sununu, thank you so much. Really appreciate your joining us on a very busy week. Let's bring Chuck back.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.